We're delighted now to welcome back to the broadcast Senator John Thune. He's a Republican from South Dakota, and he notes that the federal government now holds ownership in more than 500 private companies, and he's introduced something called the Government Ownership Exit Plan as a result. Great to have you with us, Senator.
Nice to be with you, Lou.
You know, you educated me on something. I had no idea that we had stakes in 500 companies right now.
Well, it's this TARP program, I think, has gotten much more pervasive than most Americans realize. And I guess the reason that I thought it was important that we have a piece of legislation that creates an exit strategy or an exit plan is that in most cases when the government does get involved in the private sector, it's an indefinite commitment. You know, it's very easy to wind that very difficult to wind that down. And we think it's important for the government to divest itself that on the long term that it's not a good policy, good practice to have the American government having major ownerships share in American companies for all the obvious reasons, the conflicts of interest that inherently are created. And so what I've tried to do with the bill is prescribe a date by which the government would start to divest itself of its ownership in many of these private companies.
Now, today, the president is out talking about health care and the government option, as he put it. And he did one of those things where he sort of, it was a little snarky, referring to socialized medicine. But that's exactly where we're headed, isn't it? We're talking about nationalization of businesses. We're talking about nationalization, in part, of the healthcare system.
Right, and I've described what we're currently doing through the TARP program with the auto manufacturers and insurance companies and banks as kind of the gateway drug to the government taking over the healthcare system in this country, which I think would be really bad. And my hope would be at least that there will be enough political opposition to having this government plan become a part of any health care reform proposal that passes the Congress this year, because that will, even if they pitch it as, well, we're going to give people an option, they can stay with their private insurance if they want to. We all know that this is an evolving or creeping national health care program, and that eventually you're going to see more and more people gravitate toward what they call the public plan option, but what essentially is going to be a single payer type program. So it is. I mean, this pattern is really unlike anything we've ever seen before, and I'm not sure sometimes that the American people realize exactly just how pervasive the government has gotten and how committed they are to expanding the role the government plays in our society.
Well, now, the president says he's a reluctant investor and manager of Detroit assets. He is presumably also a reluctant intervener in the healthcare system. But reluctance or no, that seems to be the direction this government is headed.
It does, and the president, I think, is seizing on what are some very extraordinary circumstances and using the emergency. And I think that the Rahm Emanuel line about don't let a crisis go to waste. Right. And there are many people in the Congress, as I'm sure you know, who really believe that a single-payer health care system is the right way to go, and they want to remake the American economy in the image of Europe. And this government ownership pathway that we're on right now is going to do just that. But I don't think that most Americans want to see that. I think that the vision of America is freedom, and obviously having a free market system that's competitive, where the government's role is more of a referee than taking sides, one side or the other. So I hope that eventually that when the American public engages on this, that they'll weigh in against this sort of takeover of the American economy by the government. I just don't think over the long term that's a good thing to do, and it certainly isn't. It does not serve the economy, small businesses, or our I think the whole idea of creating jobs in our economy very well.
Do you cringe every time you are reminded of President Bush's line that he suspended free market principles in order to save the free market?
Well, yes, I do. And, of course, it was when this thing started to go south and sideways last fall, there was a lot of pressure to intervene. The administration, I think, felt like they had to do something. And At that time, Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke were saying we've got to take these very extreme steps. But, the truth is that the type of intervention I think that occurred was very different than what most people thought it was going to be. There was this notion that we had to buy some of the toxic assets off the balance sheets of these banks, and what it ended up
Which, by the way, is one of the things we haven't done.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And what it evolved into was we took ownership interests. We started to take, buy preferred stock, common stock, and that pattern continues to this day, with the more recent incarnation being the car companies.
Well, as you look out toward where we're headed, it's clear that we're going to own more banks before we own fewer banks. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it would appear to be. Now, there are some banks, healthy banks, that are starting to sell their interest back to the federal government. But what worries me about that, however, Lou, is that Treasury Secretary Geithner has indicated that he's going to recycle these funds. So, in other words, instead of having this program end when the banks pay some of these interests back, they're looking for other places to invest them. And that, I think, is something we want to stop, too, which my bill does. But I am very worried about that. I don't think this is the end of the rainbow, so to speak. It seems to me, at least, that if we don't take some steps to put the brakes on this thing, that this whole notion of government ownership of private businesses is going to be with us for a while, because we've proven over time throughout history when the government gets involved in something, it's pretty hard to get it out.
Well, now you've come up with the idea of an exit strategy from all of this, and I think most people say that is sound, rational, and responsible. But do the Republicans at this point have a counter philosophy or strategy to that of the Obama White House and the Democratic leadership of both the Senate and the House as to what to do with this economy?
Well, I guess my view on that would be that, I know that and the stimulus was probably the best example of this. It was a very different point of view about how you stimulate the economy and create jobs. And it was sort of a belief that you have the government spend money out there and that eventually there will be some job creation associated with that. We're not seeing that yet. But I think the way that you get these things done is you incentivize the economic engines in our economy, which are our small businesses and our entrepreneurs. And
right.
So there are things that can be done, in my view, that would liberate
who, by the way,
small business. Go ahead.
Who, by the way, have been left out of the stimulus package. They've been left out of the public discussion and debate. And small business generates about 99% of the business activity in this country, as well as jobs.
Right, and got, what was it, third of 1% of the stimulus money.
Exactly.
It was just crazy the way that money was distributed. And I just think there are things that can be done that would be additive in terms of job creation, but would be focused in the right area. And having the government sort of become the agency or the agent, the catalyst for job creation, is not a permanent, solution. It's not a good long-term solution, even if it does do a little bit in the short term. But we're not even seeing much short-term evidence that that's had much positive effect. So, we'd love to debate those things, and we did put some alternatives on the table during the stimulus debate, all of which were defeated. But I just don't think that the route that we're headed right now is one that is going to be the solution to America's economic woes.
All right. Well, Senator, as always, it is great to talk with you. Wish you all the best. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Lou. Good being with you.
Senator John Thune.